After rising tensions, including a 2025 bombing of Iranian nuclear sites and increased proxy attacks, on February 28th, the United States and Israel launched a major attack, coordinated military offense against Iran, targeting nuclear facilities, military infrastructure, and leadership to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran and encourage regime change. During this time, they also resulted in the death of Iran's supreme leader. Iran has responded with retaliatory missile and drone attacks on U.S. and Israeli targets across the region, and now no one knows when the end is coming, but we may be at war itself. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric Claville, and you're joining us for this special report with the U.S. and Israel at war with Iran. Once again, I want to thank you for joining us, as you always do, as we broadcast from the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WNS Bead, Hot 91, the soul of VA. For those of you that have been watching the news and, of course, across the world, you know that we are currently at war with the country of Iran. Now, whatever your feelings on it, whether you believe we should be or should not be, we are now in full-fledged war with the Middle East, and more specifically, the country of Iran. We know that there were many families who were impacted by this, so our hearts and prayers go out to them. Also, our military is impacted as well, not just around the country or the world, but more specifically right here in Hampton Roads. And we're going to focus this show on the impact of this conflict on the Hampton Roads region and the local economy and all things centered around this particular conflict. But before we do that, I just want to, just take a look at, where we are currently in this war with Iran. Now, we do know that this has been something escalating, as I mentioned before, since 2025, where we coordinated, the United States, and I'm speaking of the United States, but through the White House, coordinated attacks where we flew stealth bombers over and we bombed Iran, targeting their nuclear sites. And with that, the justification for this is because the United States, in coordination with Israel, believed that Iran was going to enrich uranium for nuclear-grade bombs, for warheads on ballistic missiles with the ability to reach U.S. targets and interests within the United States, and including the country of Israel. Now, with that being the case, there's a lot that everyone's looking at, whether the president had the authority to do this, whether Congress had notification or not. And, there's a lot to really, hash out with this, because the Constitution clearly outlines that only Congress can declare war. But we know that we have been in armed conflicts since the last time Congress has declared war, which was World War II. We haven't declared war since that time, whether it be the Korean War, whether it be Vietnam, whether it be the Iraq War, whether it be the war in Afghanistan, the longest war that we were in the United States. However, there was no declaration of war by the U.S. Congress. These are all been initiated by the White House. Of course, the president, we know through the War Powers Act of 1973, actually has authority in order to act upon conflicts that the White House feels, the president feels, are detrimental to the United States and interests, but for a period of time. In that period of time, they have to be able to give Congress ability to provide more direction and so forth. With that, we know that there's been a couple of opportunities for Congress to retract those things, or retract the authority of the current president with the War Powers Act. And those two opportunities were both authored in part and supported by one of our U.S. senators, the junior senator from the Commonwealth of Virginia, Senator Tim Kaine. But both times those were defeated. This year alone, with the conflict of Venezuela, and also now the conflict here in Iran. As a matter of fact, U.S. Senator Mark Warner mentioned when he was here in Hampton Roads last week during his tour, he stated that this was a war of choice. And of course, Senator Mark Warner is part of what we call the Gang of Eight. The Gang of Eight is a very trusted and top secret, or well, we don't say top secret, but very trusted members of Congress, bipartisan, 8, 4 members on each side, 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats, in which top secret information is provided to in order to show that the U.S. is operating in certain areas and so forth, not exposing all this to all of Congress, but just a select groups of members. So even they did not have as much advance notice of this conflict before things actually started. So right now, there are a lot of members of not just the Democratic Party, but also some of the president's major supporters, the MAGA supporters, are really upset about this. One very, very visible is Tucker Carlson. The MAGA movement believed that the president, when he said, and he campaigned, he said, America first, no more foreign wars. We have been in war, for some of us, our entire adult lives, right? If you're 25 years old, the United States has been at war the entire time you've been born. Whether it be from 9/11 and our invasion of the country of Iraq, based upon WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, which at that time President Bush said that they did not have, but we were going to stay over there, all the way to Afghanistan, and even now there's been some major conflict that we have been engaged in. But even with that, America itself is war fatigued. A lot of veterans have gone, they're veterans now, but when they were in the military, active military, they gave the ultimate sacrifice. And a lot of individuals, families, also give sacrifice as well, supporting not just their service members who are serving, but the house that they left behind. And we're going to talk about that when we look at the impact of this conflict on the local economy and the local people. So there's a lot of trepidation that's there because there are members who are the USS Gerald R. Ford, which, by the way, is the most expensive thing created or built by man. It was over $1 billion to build that aircraft carrier. And I will note, just as a point of reference, in 2024, I was honored to be the first and currently the only, or the inaugural, speaker for the Juneteenth celebration on the USS Gerald R. Ford. And I was very honored to ask to be the first and able to speak there and able to give the tour, meet the commander and Big XO. I know he's over there serving now, so hats off to you, my friend. And I had a great opportunity to walk and have a tour of the USS Gerald R. Ford. And on top of that U.S. carrier, one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in my life. And the people, the men and women that serve on there, just an operation to have that floating city, to see it. So I know that they are engaged in a lot of major combat. I know that they are serving valiantly. And I know they're doing their jobs and doing it at a very high level. So I have no doubt about that. So to say that I support the troops or others to say they support the troops, as a veteran myself, let me tell you, the best way to support the troops is to give them what they need, but also to create good policy and not put them in situations that they don't have to be in. So if you talk about supporting the troops, you want to advocate for that. And that's coming from a veteran and a family of service members as well. So when we take a look at, what is happening now in Iran and in that region, what do we know about this particular war right now? I'm reading from an article which does show that in the first wave of attacks, we have at least 175 people as of last week who have been killed, mostly children. We also have a lot of rockets being fired. And Iran, they're also responding by firing missiles at Israel, hitting targets in Bahrain, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Oman, Jordan, Cyprus. In addition to that, Hezbollah, they fired rockets at Israel, and Israel has bombed Lebanon, and the Trump administration has said it will continue bombing for weeks. Also, a lot of conflicts are now being started, or proxy wars, adjacent to the bombing that's taking place in Iran. So now we're looking at whether the world is looking at whether this is a war that definitely needs to stop. In other words, bombs don't bring peace. It brings destruction, but not peace. In the words of Jimmy Carter, said if we, choosing between the lesser two evils, when you have to choose war, war is still evil. And it is. Sometimes it's necessary, but it is. It's the ability of countries, nation states, and people who are leaders that cannot agree on one or two or three issues, and therefore they put their nation, their people at risk because of that disagreement. So, it's more at stake than just having the best military in the world, or more at stake than just different opinions. But what's at stake is the lives of many people, a lot of innocent people as well, a lot of innocent people. So we want to make sure that we keep that at the forefront. Not only that, but when we take a look at what's happening, look at the cost of this war, the cost of human lives, the cost of jobs, the cost of industries that are suffering as well. As a matter of fact, according to CNBC, article last week stated that this war, the Iran war, threatens an $11.7 trillion travel industry as passengers get caught in the crossfire. Just of last week, all right? First of all, $11 trillion. That's a lot. That is more than most countries put together in developing nations annual. If you look at that annual GDP, right? Look at that budget. Put all those countries together in developing countries, that's more than all of those countries put together. Just that one industry. Now, keep in mind, according to CNBC, just last week, at least 20,000 flights in and out of the Middle East have been canceled since the U.S.-Israeli attacks and strikes on Iran, right? And then, of course, Iran's retaliation in other nations, such as Dubai. First of all, Dubai is a place where the world comes. It was created as just a small little place in the Middle East where the world comes to have business, pleasure. I mean, it is. I was totally impressed when Dubai first started building. I mean, it was just. I remember 3 decades ago when the idea started. Actually, right at about 4 decades ago when the idea started, and now we see it today, right? And the fact that rockets were shot there and at the airport in Dubai, you would have never thought it in a million years, but here we are. Not only that, but of course, also according to CNBC, more than 1 million people were affected by cancellations and airspace closures. Now, of course, they also noted that it's part of a growing number of conflicts that have affected the global tourism industry this year, and shows that people who are far from falling missiles, drone attacks, and other geopolitical flashpoints aren't immune to the ripple effects. So once again, you're not immune from it. This is something that is happening. Now, they quoted someone who's a Chinese food medicine therapist. Their flight plans were derailed as a result of this just last week. And they told CNBC that they had to pay $1,600 to get to Shanghai, more than double the price of their original plane ticket just to get home. Just to get home. And that $1.7 trillion figure to the world's economy is, according to the industry group World Travel and Tourism Council. So once again, this war affects all of us around the world, not just the people who are on the ground involved, not the people that are making the decisions, but those that are caught in the crossfire, both of the bullets that are flying, the rockets that are going to be blasted and explode, but also the economic effects of it as well. When we also look at the economic effects, we also look at the Strait of Hormuz and the shipping industry. Keep in mind, the Middle East is a major hub for crude oil that fuels the world for the most part. And not only that, but other goods that come from that area, agricultural goods and the like. The fact that that strait now is in the crosshairs of this war is problematic. So now we see that the strait, and with this, is going to be a problem. As a matter of fact, just last week, President Trump said he wants the U.S. Navy to escort tankers through the Gulf. But that's going to be a chokehold, because if you look at the Strait of Hormuz and the chokehold on the Persian Gulf waterways, shipping now is going to be an issue. So, getting any product, according to BNN Bloomberg, through the Strait of Hormuz will seem to be impossible. I mean, it is definitely a major issue. So, China is also impacted, the world, because right now they're in talks just last week with Iran to allow safe oil and gas passage through the strait. So now you have China getting involved to allow this strait to let ships pass through. So once again, it is a major war. It's a major conflict. We are in it, and it's going to impact us all. But how will it impact us in Hampton Roads? It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric LaVille, and you're joining us for this special report on the impact of the war in Iran. U.S. and Israel launched attacks against the regime of Iran on February 28th, 2026, ahead of rising tensions, which started in June when the United States dropped bombs on Iran, targeting their nuclear facilities. Since that time, Iran has launched counterattacks across the Middle East. Also, others closer to Israel have also launched strikes at the country as well. Now it has put the world in a state of flux of determining first of all, what side are you on? Secondly, how long will this last? Thirdly, what are the financial impacts? And then lastly, what does this mean for the world power structure? But right now I want to focus on its impact on Hampton Roads. As I mentioned earlier in the show, this is a major area. Hampton Roads, this is the largest military region in the country, right? U.S. military itself. We have the most veterans that live and retire here than any other region in the United States. That's something to be proud of. For me, I love this area. This is where I have decided, we decided to make our home. And this is the area that has given us so much. And we love giving back to it so much. And not only that, but this is an area where we thrive. And many others feel that same way. So it's a beautiful area to be a part of. And part of that major, the key to that major impact is the U.S. military and the people and all of the support around it. Not only that, but we are also home to the largest naval base in the world. That's right. And we have an aircraft carrier that's serving right now in the Middle East, was in South America at Venezuela, following operations there by the White House to dethrone their leader because of narco-terrorism indictment. But now they're in the Middle East serving there. And we don't know how long they're going to be there. And that's part of the impact that we are looking at here in Hampton Roads. According to 13 News Now, the U.S.-Iran conflict poses a significant risk to Hampton Roads' economy, primarily through rising fuel and consumer prices, potential supply chain disruptions at the Port of Virginia, and a slowdown in local consumer spending due to increased military deployments. And yes, a prolonged conflict could cause inflation and reduce economic activity. We're going to look at each of those separately in just a moment. But I also want to talk about, before we look at, the money aspect. Money is very important, right? We need it to live, need to operate, we need it to make things happen. We need it for resources. It's part of it. But here's one of the major, but above all of that, one thing that's more precious than that are the lives of our loved ones. The lives of our loved ones can't be replaced. Once they're gone, they're gone. And one thing about our military families is that they face that more often than anyone else, especially with these deployments. When we look at what they're facing and what is happening, we have to understand that our support for them is just as vital as their service overseas, their service in conflicts. So it's very incumbent upon us to make sure that as local leaders, local neighbors, local friends, local restaurants and bars and taverns and local everything, whatever it is, we have to be laser focused on ensuring that their loved ones aren't suffering here, because we want them to be freed up to do their job overseas and come back home. But we also have to be cognizant that when they come back, they also have to be taken care of. Again, I mentioned the stores and the local restaurants and the like, but also our nonprofits, our churches, our communities of worship. This is an opportunity to now step up our service to them as they serve us. So whether we agree with this war of choice or not, we're in it and we're in it together. So it's up to us to do our part to help and also support the diplomacy that will bring them home as well. So let's take a look at some of these areas that I mentioned earlier. Let's take a look at some key impacts according to the Hampton Roads region, according to 13 News Now. Now, I've had an opportunity to appear on 13 News Now Plus with Eugene Daniel, good friend of mine, who's a phenomenal reporter, anchor. Just absolutely outstanding journalist. And we talked about this right after it happened, and I appeared on 13 Plus News Now. You can take a look at it, go to their website, their YouTube, or social media pages, and you can see the entire half-hour interview that we did. But the impact I mentioned a lot of these areas already, and I'm going to expound upon some that they've listed as well, and some of the local economists also. But it is something that it's a head-scratcher, but it's also a reality. It's here, whether we agree with it or not, and we have to make sure that we are cognizant of it and we plan for it. One of my sons, our youngest son, was at the gas station one day, and he called me. He said, "Dad, have you went to the gas station lately?" I said, "No, I go at the beginning of the week," but, he said, "Have you paid attention to the prices?" And really I don't, but he said, of course he does, because I give him allowance, so he's got to see how much money he has. So he says, "Dad, gas was this amount earlier last week. Now it's this amount today." And then, of course, he came home for spring break, so he's at the gas station again, and he needs additional money because, again, prices are so high. It's gone up again. So fuel prices have gone up several times in his area in North Carolina, and I'm pretty sure across the Hampton Roads as well. I'm going to, fill up shortly, but, again, that impact. So rising costs, number one, according to 13 News Now, increased oil prices will likely lead to higher costs at the pump, increased electricity, natural gas prices, and higher prices for consumer goods. Now, with this being the case, this is a major area that affects everybody. No one, not one person. I don't care if you're the wealthiest person in Hampton Roads or you are the person that struggles the most. You are impacted by this one factor. Increased prices at the pump, increased electricity, increased natural gas prices, increased consumer goods. We consume this every day. When you click the light on at your house, that's going to cost you more. When you're heating your home, that's going to cost you more. When you go to the store to buy food, that's going to cost you more. When you go to the gas pump, that's going to cost you more. And it's because of this conflict. So you want to be mindful of what it's going to cost you. Not only that, but let's take a look again at military deployment impacts. As a major military hub, I mentioned supporting the families. Now let's take a look at the impact that it's having on this particular hub. We have over 85,000 active duty service members. Now, with that, this significant deployment, according to 13 News Now, would see service members and their dependents leave, which slows down the local economic activity. Small business in particular, those in their bases are going to be expected to feel this impact as well. All right, so aircraft carrier, you got about 5,000 people in that, right? 5,000. It's a floating city, right? So when you have that type of, you take 5,000 people out of anywhere, or you put 5,000 people in somewhere, those dollars are not being spent. And guess where they're not being spent? At the gas pump, at the convenience store, at the barbershop, at the hair salon, at the nail shop, at the grocery store, at the local restaurant, at the lunch place, at the mall, at the outlets. It's not being spent. And those are things that individuals need. Now, of course, if you live in a home, you're still going to have lawn service. If you pay for it, there are certain things that you're going to have to do. But even if you're not driving your car, it doesn't need service, doesn't need maintenance. So that's going to impact service providers for oil changes, for regular service maintenance. All of this becomes impacted. Also, according to 13 News Now, supply chain disruptions. Potential disruptions, we talked about it earlier, shipping routes, particular with this Strait of Hormuz, but it's going to affect the Port of Virginia and also related industries. So let's break it down and show you how this impacts you. You're like, well, Strait of Hormuz, that's all the way over there. Port of Virginia, that's all the way, in Norfolk. You see those cranes moving and so forth and so on. But those shipping containers have things in it. So when you want to go to the store and let's just say you need a new dishwasher or washing machine or appliance, and they say, well, it's going to be a 3-month wait. Well, your dishes, they're not waiting. Your clothes that need washing, they're not waiting, or drying for appliance purposes. Or you want to get that new kitchen table, or you want to get some new furniture, or even new clothing. All that stuff are located in those shipping containers to get through the strait. Now, to get through those shipping channels, now you have to divert those shipping channels for other services it has to go below the Cape of Good Hope, which is South Africa. If you take a look at the world map, it's easier to get through certain areas of the world than others. Going all the way down toward South Africa, which is close to Antarctica than not, and then come back up to here, that takes a lot longer. So guess what? It's going to cost. That cost gets passed on to the consumer even once you get it. So now it's impacting the timing of your goods, and it's also impacting your pockets because you're going to pay more for something that took longer. And then finally, we're going to look at economic uncertainty. According to 13 News Now, if the conflict lasts for months, it could lead to reduced business confidence, hiring, and investment in this region. One thing that we've seen the stock market go down a lot, day by day because of the uncertainty of the war. We've seen the president ask for, defense contractors to build faster. We need more bombs. We need more of this, more of that. So when you take a look at economic uncertainty, some industries, the war industry, shipbuilding industry, we have Newport News Shipbuilding, Huntington Ingalls here, and the businesses that support it, they're, we were in a good position. So there are jobs available. There are industries that are going to benefit. So I want to make sure we highlight the good because that's something that we know that we can rely upon. However, on the other side, there are some industries that are going to suffer. And those are others that will have a pause in wanting to hire. Those are ones that have a pause in wanting to invest. And then when confidence, which is a major part of our GDP, major part of our index when we look at business, and also the stock market, confidence in the economy is a major part of it. You can't measure it numerically other than the outcome, but when it's not there, right? The outcome of the stock market, but when it's not there because it goes down. With all of this that's happening, it is uncertain. Economics, the length of deployments and the like. But one thing is certain, and that is our ability of human kindness and resiliency. These are uncertain times, uncharted waters. But one thing we do know is that if we stick together and support each other and work to understand each other, we can get through it and to the other side. So stick with us. We're going to continue to cover this because it will continue to impact our lives. But stay of good cheer. And until next time, be good, be great. God bless. And we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Clavel.